everybody, welcome back to my channel. I hope y'all are doing well. In today's video, I'll be discussing the United States Women's National Team versus Canada in the semifinal match of the 2021 Olympic Games. I'll talk about the lineup, the formation, the first half, the second half, the penalty that we conceded, an individual player analysis, and my thoughts regarding our team's overall performance. And at the very end, I'll give my thoughts going into the next game, which is the bronze medal match against Australia. As always, timestamps will be in the description box down below. If you enjoyed the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe. Let me know what you think down below. And without further ado, let's get started. We came out in our typical 4-3-3 lineup with Alyssa Nair in goal, the same back line as the previous game. The only change was the addition of Tierna Davidson in place of Abby Dahlkemper. In the midfield, we had the same players of Julia Ertz and Lindsay Horan, but instead of Sam Mewis, we had the addition of Rose Lavelle, and up top it was Tobin Heath, Lynn Williams, and Alex Morgan. We came out in our typical 4-3-3 lineup, and we stayed true to this for most of the game. Now there are times when Tobin and Rose, similar to the previous game with Sam Mewis, would switch, and Tobin would drop back and Rose would go forward. But we stayed for the most part in the same formation. The only change we made was the last 15 minutes of the game. We went to a 3-back. That was obviously to try to find an equalizer. We immediately started the game with a very high tempo, high press, high pace. There was tons of energy from our side. We came out on the front foot. We had most of the opportunities in the first 15 minutes of the game. We were creating multiple chances down the right side of our field through Kelley O'Hara and Tobin Heath and Rose Lavelle. The interchange between Rose and Tobin was causing lots of issues, and it created space that allowed Kelley to get forward and then drive at those pockets, get to the end line, and then find her cross. And if the cross didn't work, we would also end up winning a lot of corners. While we did create so many opportunities for ourselves, we just weren't able to really capitalize on any of them, but it was a better start from any of the games we've had in this tournament so far. A lot of this had to do with the fact that our back line was so high up. They were sitting at about midfield, and so that made the field very compact, and it really kept Canada in their own defensive half. It prevented them from getting out, and even if they tried the long ball, lots of times our defenders were ready to try to make the play, and we'd win it back fairly quickly. This is also what allowed us to win the ball higher up the field in a better scoring position. Finally, our forwards who were putting in the high press were getting a reward for their efforts because we were able to win the second ball. And all of that is what contributed to our success fairly on in the game. Because our backline was positioned so high up, we had to really make sure that Canada didn't check back to receive the ball, because again it would allow us to pin them in their half, and we were doing a really good job at that. Tierna Davidson in particular was doing a really good job at following Nichelle Prince and Christine Sinclair and whoever checked back. There was one specific moment where the ball was played in, but she was so tight behind her man that Julia Ertz was able to win the second ball because the player just couldn't control it. And that's something that we were not doing against the Netherlands with Vivian Miedema. We were already off to a much better start. We just needed to capitalize on our opportunities, but unfortunately we just didn't. And Canada was able to grow into the match. They were able to get possession, like I've mentioned in my videos before. Once you connect one pass in 2 and 3, and you start playing a little bit more simple and you be smart with it, you start to generate the momentum in your favor. And that's what Canada was doing. What helped Canada is that we were also being a little bit more sloppy as the game grew. We were forcing long balls even though the field was much more compact at this point, and our passing was pretty sloppy. We were dying down in our momentum, and Canada was just able to get back into this match, and they ended up getting about 3 or 4 corners pretty fairly on about the 20th minute mark. They were getting a lot of success down the right side of our field, specifically due to the fact that Crystal Dunn was caught out of position a lot. Her and Lynn Williams don't work well. Lynn was not doing a good enough job at tracking back to help Crystal Dunn, and she was getting overloaded in the flank, and not to mention Crystal Dunn is often really too far away from Tierna Davidson or whoever the center back is. So when you have too much space in between the player, they would just play in the channel and the space in behind was open. So that's why they're finding so much success. But if they get in that position, it's fine. We just have to make sure they go backwards. And again, Crystal, like I said in my last video, isn't doing a good enough job at closing down the cross, and that's actually what led to Alyssa Nair getting injured, is a cross in. Crystal could have actually tried to challenge it. She could have stuck a foot out, but she just gets close to the player and watches them cross it in, which I don't understand, because it's like, I'd rather you prevent the cross or at least try to challenge them. I mean, shit, if you get beat 1v1, that sucks, right? But I mean, at least you attempted to defend it, but just standing there knowing she's going to kick it anyway, not putting enough pressure on it, not even cutting off the angle, it's not good enough, and she has to step much harder. But anyway, Alyssa went to grab the ball, came out, hyperextended her knee, and the minute she went down, I knew like it was serious, because Alyssa doesn't make stuff up. She's one of the toughest players on this team, And although she tried to continue, she ended up taking the goal kick and they had to take her off because of her knee. Unfortunately, she won't be able to play in the bronze medal match, and I'm absolutely gutted for her. But that led AD Franch to get her appearance in the Olympics. Luckily for us, Canada just could not send in a good corner service. Janine Becky's service was pretty terrible, to be honest. We weren't necessarily threatened at all. I don't think they had a single shot in the first half that I can remember, at least one that was threatening in any way. AD didn't have to make a big save or anything. And so we got lucky in that aspect, but we did have our chances as well. We were just running into issues, and what was happening is Julia Ertz was just kind of standing, and she would be open for the ball, but not open enough where it would make sense logically to pass it to her. And Horan and Lavelle weren't doing a good enough job of checking back, so Becky would then be forced to try to dribble it out of the back, and there were multiple times where she'd run into trouble and she'd lose it, or she'd be forced to try to force a pass, and it just wasn't working. Like I mentioned a few minutes ago with the Crystal situation, not stepping hard enough, being out of position in terms of being caught up way too high in the field. Kelley, I think, had one of the best games I've seen her play in a very long time. She did a great job of picking and choosing when she wanted to go forward, and her recovery was fantastic as well. And I think that's something that Crystal can try to learn from, is to make sure she doesn't get out of position too often, because we see mostly that Canada was attacking down that side of the field, and it was just because of all the space that was being left due to the miscommunications between her and Lynn Williams, and just the space that she was allowing because she was out of position and caught too high. That wasn't the only issue, obviously. In the midfield, we were having issues because Horan and Lavelle weren't checking back to get it, and they weren't getting on the ball enough. And when they were on the ball, Rose specifically was struggling because she was losing the ball often. Her touch was poor. She was trying to dribble when she shouldn't have. And Horan, I think she was good, but she just wasn't active enough to make a huge difference in the midfield. And then up top, one of the huge issues I've noticed is we make vertical runs, but if you're constantly making vertical runs, and I just mean running forward in a straight line, it's so easy to defend that, because as long as you stay with the person or you get in front of them, they can't receive the ball because they're facing the other way and you're facing the ball, so the defender can easily step in and receive the pass, which is what was happening. We weren't seeing any side-to-side runs, any horizontal motion. By doing that, if Alex Morgan would have just made a run down the sideline from the middle of the field, it would have drawn out one of the players, or the defenders would have had to communicate who was going to go with her. And oftentimes they don't make that adjustment in time. And so that's what allows that space to be utilized. But we weren't doing that. There was one specific moment where Alex Morgan was dribbling at the back line, and Roosevelt was running forward, Lynn Williams was running forward, but not a single one of their runs was threatening enough or even in any way open for Alex to then play it to her. I think one thing that's important to point out is, I've mentioned throughout this entire tournament, I don't agree with the way we're pressing, but one negative downside of it offensively is when Tobin is so tucked far in and we win the ball back, there's no option back post to then try to receive it. There's no option on the far side. And there was another example of that when Alex had a shot. She was in the position where she was like, okay, I can shoot it or I can cross it, and she chose to go for the cross, but there was nobody there because Tobin's being forced to stay in the middle to try to keep the field compact. And then when we win it, she does not have enough time to get forward into a position to help the team. So I think, again, that is yet another negative side effect of the way that we're pressing. Overall, I wasn't very impressed with Lynn Williams. I mean, she had a phenomenal game against the Netherlands, but in this one, it was kind of the football we're used to seeing her play, with her poor touches and decision making, and she was struggling to just connect a pass. And although Tobin isn't on the score sheet, you can always count on Tobin to get back defensively. A common theme throughout this game and throughout this tournament is whatever side Tobin's on is the side that we find success. In the first half, it's her and Kelley. In the second half, it's her and Crystal Dunn. And I think a lot of that has to do with the way she interchanges with Rose, the runs she makes, the way she checks back to get the ball. Any sort of movement or rhythm or energy can help always create pockets, and that's something you can always count on from Tobin. Overall, I think our front three had a pretty okay performance, but it just, going into halftime, we needed to regroup and do a better job at maintaining the momentum that we started out the game with. In the second half, we came out with much more intensity. Whatever discussion was made at halftime really worked with these players, and we looked much more threatening for a longer period of time than we have in any other game of this tournament, except against New Zealand, but that doesn't count. We had Canada pinned back for a good 15 minutes of the second half, and we were creating chance after chance after chance. We had corners after corner after corner. We just couldn't capitalize on them. I think an issue that Black Host had this tournament is adjusting to what the game needs, not necessarily going with the initial game plan. Like, you can have planned substitutions, but if your player who you're going to sub out is having a really good game, I say leave him on. Leave him on for 10 more minutes? because then your sub gets 10 more minutes of rest. And in that 10 minutes, if they can use that energy to then generate a goal, then that person's done their job. A substitution is supposed to be a reinforcement and not a liability. And I don't necessarily think these subs were a liability, but I don't think they were needed. I think our front three in that moment were doing fine. Yeah, I think you could have taken Lynn and Alex off, but Tobin should have stayed on. But whatever subs make, just make them a few at a time. Don't just change the entire front line, because when we did that, after we made those 3 subs, Canada got its first chance in our 18 the entire half. But when our subs came on, we had Rapinoe, Carly, Kristen Press, and Kristen came on, she immediately started working hard. Rapinoe was putting more effort in than I think I've ever seen her do. And Carly, while her touches and her passes weren't on, she had a great shot. She ended up having a header at the end of the game. And so we had chances again. We kept creating opportunities. Lindsay Horan had a header. Kristen Press had a header. JJ had a header off of a corner. And so the players who came on, they did good work, and they did put in a good shift. But again, like I've mentioned, I don't think it was the right timing. And what I would have really liked to see, and Kristen Press did this once, but it just wasn't enough. One player can't be the only one dribbling at the back line and trying to find a shot. I would have loved to see Lindsay Horan or Rose Lavelle take that space in the middle and just have a shot from out wide, because yeah, we were finding lots of success down the flanks, but what would happen is when we didn't have any options or a cross wasn't being made available because Canada was closing us down, we would just play it into the middle to JJ and then switch it out to the other side. And I think we could have tried to catch them off guard by just getting the ball in the middle and immediately taking a touch and trying to shoot it, because then it's like at least you can test LeBay, maybe get a rebound, and you never know, maybe it'll go in. But we didn't have a player who stepped up and said, you know what, I'm going to go for it, because chance after chance, corner after corner, you got to start switching things up and make it unpredictable, and we just weren't doing that. And I think that is a confidence thing as well, because we've seen players like Rose and Kristen do that. It just wasn't on. But I said in my last video our luck would run out, and it did, because with the amount of chances we had, we should have put them away. The team a year ago, I think, would have scored most of a good portion of those. In a game like this, it reminds me a lot of when we played Sweden in the quarterfinal, is you can have a team park the bus and then get one single opportunity on the counterattack or the long ball, and that's the game. That's exactly what happened, is the ball was played long and Tierna went to clear it and caught the girl's leg, and it was a penalty. Listen, I think it's harsh, because what is Tierna Davidson supposed to do? You know, she clearly has the angle to clear it, and she's going to do that. It's not her fault that Rose runs into her leg. You know what I'm saying? From Canada's perspective, she got kicked and fell in the box, so that's a penalty. But I just don't understand what Tierna was supposed to do. Not make the play? Let Rose just run onto the ball? Rose wasn't even in a position to score. I think if that play would have happened on any other part of the field, the ref wouldn't have called it a foul. And I think it's really telling when a play like that happens and nobody on either team reacts. Because what happened is the ball goes out of bounds and AD Franch goes to get it for a goal kick, and Tierna turns around and no one even complained that it could have been a penalty. You know, the camera panned on Canada's bench and not a single one of them threw their hands up in the air or were like, ref! I think that's really telling, because that, in my opinion, shows that not a single player on the field actually thought it was a penalty until VAR went and looked at it. You know, I feel bad for AD Franch because she's put in a terrible position, but the penalty was so perfect. There's no one saving that. And props to AD, she guessed the correct way. But this penalty was taken in the 75th minute. Now suddenly our team looks awake. But in a match like this, you're down 1-0, the game is on line, the gold medal match is on the line. You need a player to step up and say, okay, we have 15 minutes left plus extra time. We just need to relax. Like, we don't need to force anything. We don't need to play desperate. That's the word I'm looking for. We don't need to be desperate, but that's exactly what it turned into. We were sending crosses in that weren't on. We were trying to dribble players we couldn't get around. And at that point for Canada, it becomes game management. We really didn't have any answer. You know, Carly had her header. I think Carly a few years ago would have scored that. It's just one of those things where we had our chances, we just didn't capitalize on them, and we can't blame anybody but ourselves. And despite our best efforts to try to find an equalizer, we just couldn't find the back of the Canadian net, and we ended up losing that game 1-0. I'm going to discuss my final thoughts before I discuss the individual players, because I think it makes more sense in this game. I think at the end of the day, we had our chances to score. Our luck was running out in this tournament. Props to Canada. They stuck to their game plan. In the first half, they had a lot more chances, but in the second half, their first shot on goal was the penalty. They were completely pinned in their half. They were hanging on, but they hung on and they weathered the storm and they waited for their opportunity and they took advantage of it. Props to Jessie Fleming, 23 years old, steps up and takes a banger of a penalty kick. Props to Sinclair for, sort of symbolic, like passing the torch on to the youth because, she's probably going to retire. It was Canada's day. It was Canada's turn to experience the joy, and for their fan base and for their program as well. I think it's such a positive thing for them, and hopefully they can go on and win the gold. I want them to win the gold. I mean, I don't want Sweden to win, but at the end of the day, I don't really care who wins, to be honest. So yeah, I'm very happy for Canada. They deserve it. But I think they got lucky with that penalty. Yeah, I do. But at the end of the day, it's like, dude, they did what they came to do. You ain't gonna complain. A goal's a goal, bro. They won fair and square. So individual players, I'm again not going to go into very great depth talking about some players because we lost and it sucks, and there's no player to blame, there's no player to put it on, and it's hard to talk about a player having a good performance when you lose in a semifinal match, but there are people I do want to mention. The first player I wanted to talk about was Kelley O'Hara. I think Kelley had one of the best performances I have seen her had in a very long time. I think the thing that made her stood out to me was her decision making, her passing. She'd get the ball. There were moments in the game where you could see like she wanted to kick it forward, but it was like, it's not going to make it anyway. And so it played on the ground. And yeah, she had her moments where her passes were poor, but not everybody's going to be 100% perfect. But I just think overall, defensively, she stayed very tight. She stayed tight with her defender. She stayed compact with Becky Sauerbrunn. We saw little attack come down her side of the field, and I think that's a true testament to the positioning that she has. I think she was great offensively and getting into the attack. She did it mostly in the first half, but in the second half, she did have chances as well. Sent in a lot of great crosses that ended up connecting. I think this is probably Kelley's last international tournament, unfortunately. She has so many miles on her body, but I just think for her, it was such a solid performance, and without her in the back line, I think that we would have been a lot more unstable. Tierna Davidson. My heart hurts for Tierna because I don't want her to blame herself for that. I think the penalty was very harsh because, like I mentioned, I don't know what she's supposed to do in that situation. Is she supposed to not try to make a play on it? And I don't consider it a mistake. Like, I really don't, because she was trying to make a defensive play. There's no blame you can put on her. She had done great this entire tournament. She's 22 years old. She's the youngest player on this roster, and she plays like a veteran. And so I'm so proud of her. Her performance was wonderful. She had a few iffy moments with her passing out of the back, but other than that, she was great. She stayed tight with her defender. She had so many essential blocks off of crosses. She was phenomenal. It was just that one moment in the match. I hope she starts in the bronze medal match because I think she deserves it, and I think she's going to be a huge part of this team in the long run. Franch. I wanted to give credit to Adriana Franch because you're sitting on the bench, you get put on the Olympic roster, and you never assume you're going to even see the field. And then Alyssa Nair goes down injured. She gets up and warms up, and then Alyssa Nair stays on, so the initial rush of, oh my god, I'm going on, is gone. And then a few minutes later, she goes off, and you have to go on, and you have to put on the brave face, and you have to be strong mentally, and you have to step up for your team and do the best you can. And I thought she was great. And I just really hope, again with Tierna, she doesn't blame herself or be overly harsh on herself for that penalty, because there was no saving that. It would be like trying to blame yourself for not saving Megan Rapinoe's penalty in the last shootout. There was just simply no saving it. There's some penalties that are perfect. I have 100% confidence in her going into the bronze medal match because she will, I assume, be playing. I couldn't imagine them using Jane. But yeah, I'm really excited to see her play. My thoughts going into the bronze medal match. It hurts, it stings, but at the end of the day, I'm not disappointed in our team. I'm really not. I'm not disappointed in any of the girls. I can only imagine how hard it would be to go compete in an Olympics where you're being forced to quarantine with the same people every single day for about a month. You're not allowed to leave the hotel. You're sleeping on a cardboard mattress because they don't want you to have sex. I mean, just give them a regular mattress and just say don't have sex. If the athletes want to risk getting COVID, that's their own fucking problem. And not to mention, there's no fans. You can't see your family. Family wasn't allowed to travel. And so I can only imagine how hard that would be mentally to stay focused and positive every single day in training, every single match, every moment. So yeah, I give them major props because I couldn't have been able to do that. I'm gutted for players like Alyssa. I would have loved to have seen her play in the bronze medal match. Without her, we wouldn't have made it this far in the tournament, and I really hope she has a speedy recovery. I'm gutted for Carly because this is most likely, if not, I'll be concerned, but this is her last major tournament. Perhaps maybe her last game. Same with Megan Rapinoe. And, she's out there after the game running sprints because she's disappointed in herself. I'm gutted for Tierna because because there's going to be some dumbasses out there who blame her. And just for the entire team, my heart hurts for them. It really does. Because the pressure they've had to do good, and they know they're not doing well. And Megan Rapinoe said after the game that they're just not playing with joy. And that hurts me because that's what this game is about, is joy and entertainment and fun and passion and just love for football. And that's what I want for them going into the bronze medal match. I mean, yes, the expectation for the United States is to win the gold medal every single time, but that's just unrealistic. It's not going to happen. And I think it's unfortunate that we have taken a team and turned them into a gold-only team. The only way you'll be respected or valued or good enough is if you win gold, because that's simply not true. I mean, a bronze medal in an Olympics is a phenomenal achievement. And so going into this match, yes, it sucks, but let's take that pain and let's try to leave with something to look forward to. Let's give this next generation of players who come in something to fight for, something to do better. Our core of younger players on this team, Lindsey Horan, Rose Lavelle, Tierna Davidson, Sonnet, the players on the bench, the alternates, the players who weren't called up, who were almost on the roster. The pain that they're experiencing now, they'll take with them to the next camp and the next camp and to next year and to the next World Cup, and they're not going to forget how bad it hurt. And I think that's something that makes this team so special, is they can get beat down so many times that they're always going to get back up. And I think their response to this next game will really show their character. We didn't have what it takes to make it to the gold medal match. You know, maybe it was the age of our players, you know, the exhaustion, the lack of rest leading into the Olympics. We had the send-off series, we had the series in Texas. You know, maybe it was the fact that we were isolated, COVID, you know, all these factors. But at the end of the day, we have a chance to win a bronze medal, and I'd like to go in and win it, and so we can go home with our heads up and know that despite our shortcomings, we still succeeded. The players I'd like to see play in this next game. Black line the same, I'd like to see Tierna. I'd like to see the same midfield, because you know Horan's angry, you know Lavelle is angry, you know JJ's angry. And plus those three players deserve to start in the bronze medal match based off their overall performance up top. I'd like to see Tobin and Kristen together, and I'd like to see Carly, because you know Carly's going to be angry. She's going to do everything in her power to try to get a goal. And if I was Australia, I'd be concerned, because this team is about to come out with a lot of anger. And when you play with anger, you play with intensity, and when you play with intensity, there's tons of energy. And when that's a group mentality, you become incredibly dangerous. So at the end of the day, we didn't get the result we wanted. It's a lesson that we can learn. I'm happy for Canada and their program, and I hope they go on to beat Sweden. And if not, it's still a great accomplishment for them. I'm happy for all the girls on their team, especially Christine Sinclair. Let me know what you guys think down below. Let me know your thoughts going into the bronze medal match. I'm going to make a video after the bronze video about my thoughts on Vlatko, the whole fire Vlatko. Do I think we should fire Vlatko? I will let you know. Spoiler, no, I really don't think so. But yeah, if you like the video, give it a thumbs up. Don't forget to subscribe, and I'll see you guys later. Bye!